So this is standard part 2 III. Teachers must have an understanding and always act within the statutory frameworks. So I'm just going to start off with a bit of health and safety that Connors and Morris 2015 say that they need to know the health and safety for each class. That means making sure you know the group size, their ability, what they have and haven't learned, and what they're going to need to know in order to make sure that they are safe within a certain subject. In this case, it will be a javelin lesson, which I think is probably one of the most important ones to make sure that health and safety is thorough. So just start off with a health and safety policy and show the risk management. So this shows that there's got to be a risk assessment for everything that we do, and making sure that we understand what risks may happen and how to prevent them. So before I did this lesson, I come up with my own mini risk assessment just to make sure that I had an understanding of what risks there may be and how they may prevent them, which I showed to my mentor on that and made sure that they were happy before going ahead with planning and performing and delivering a lesson to the year sevens that I'm going to show you in a second. So once they were happy with that, I actually planned the lesson and delivered it. And as you can see in this column here, highlighted in red, is all the health and safety that I went through. So to start off with, I made sure that all students were warmed up properly. This meant that they were stretching and using dynamic stretches and had a pulse raiser, etc., just to make sure that our heart was going round, the blood was pumping, and that they weren't going to have any overstretch injuries. So this is the first thing, and then during the lesson, I made sure, as this was their first proper javelin lesson, I made sure that went through safety procedures of picking up the javelin, making sure that they know how to pick it up properly, making sure that they know not to run, and making sure that they know how to pass over a javelin or put it down behind the cone properly, and making sure that they knew all the safety procedures before we even started the lesson. And this was done by questioning different students to make sure that they all fully understood before moving on with the lesson. Once I was happy that they all understood, we went through different safety procedures. So and made sure that all students were at least 5 meters away. So as you can see in this picture here, the cones were at least 5 meters away, which meant that there was less chance for a student to throw it directly across into somebody else, and it made it a lot easier to throw forward, and it just made it more simple, and the fact it made it safer for each of the students. Going back to the lesson plan, after this I made sure that all the left-handers were at one end, so the left-handers were at the far end, because if they were going to throw, they're going to throw away from if they were going to miss throw, they're going to throw away from the right-handed students, rather than towards the right-handed students. And along with this, once I made sure that they were throwing one at a time, which meant that once one person had thrown, they'd take a step back, which meant the next person could throw, and then next person, etc., etc. This meant that they were well out the way with each other, and that they were a safe distance back for the next person to throw. Especially with year sevens who hadn't done it before, this was quite a nice way of doing it to make sure that they all felt safe and they all knew exactly how to throw the javelin. After this, I made sure that the peers that weren't throwing from here were at least 5 meters back. Here it was more like 10 meters. This just made sure that they were well out the way and that they weren't going to interfere with the people throwing the javelin, and making sure that everybody was safe and miles out of the way, and that the javelin wasn't going to come back and poke them in the eye, etc. It's just an easier way of doing it, making sure that they're behind a cone as well, and anybody that come in front would be sanctioned. After this, the last thing that I did was the collection. So I made sure that everybody threw before they collected their javelin. This ensured that they'd all thrown and people weren't trying to walk out or run out to try and collect their javelin before everybody had thrown, and obviously that would make a big issue. So I made sure that everybody was safe in that way. And this comes back to the risk assessment and the planning of the lesson, which showed that I knew the health and safety procedures and what students needed to do, and how I was happy teaching the lesson to make sure that they were all safe. And I feel that they all did this throughout the lesson really well, and it made for a really safe, fun throwing lesson where the students really enjoyed it. The last thing I'm going to talk about is the different weights. This has a major impact as students throw in heavier weights at a younger age. So if you look here, under 13 boys, so all year 7s and 8s, potentially are going to throw 400-gram javelins, which means that if they're throwing 600 grams in year 7, they're throwing too heavy javelins, which could cause strains or injuries to the arms, which is not good. So this was on a board in the sports hall cupboard, which made sure that we knew exactly what weight for what students they needed. And this was a nice way of doing it, because it meant that if you ever forgot, it was right there next to the javelins, and that you could always see which weight they could have. Also, if this is the impact of this, but also if a year 9 or 10 boy was throwing a 400-gram javelin, they're probably going to throw it further, so they get sort of further distances, which make them feel better. However, in competitions, etc., it will put them down a bit because they'll be throwing heavier javelins. In terms of the health and safety with this, overthrowing back to the injuries is not gonna help. So having in my lesson, making sure that the year sevens are going to throw 400 gram javelins and no more, really showed me that I knew what I needed to do. And even before the lesson, I could go back through, see the health and safety aspects of it, and make sure that I knew them in my head before delivering, which made it safe for both myself and the students taking part.